Hello, and welcome to this fifth episode of the Geneva Center for Security Policy webinar series on global crisis, global risk, and global consequences. My name is Jean Marc Rickli. I'm the head of Global Risk and Resilience at GCSP. The GCSP is an international nonprofit foundation physically based in Geneva, Switzerland, comprised of 52 states in its foundation council, of which all the permanent member of the Security Council of the UN. The GCSP mission is to promote peace and international security, to promote and transform individuals and organizations so that they create a safer world, and we are impartial, independent, and inclusive. We rely on a community of more than 8,200 influential alumni around the world, and we provide executive education, research, public discussion, as well as innovative fellowship program for executive in transition. The first week when we started this webinar series, the coronavirus was approaching 1 million infection, and there were almost 48,000 deaths that had been counted. This week, we have more than 3.2 million infection worldwide and more than 227,000 deaths. Today's topic is on the crisis and the impact of the coronavirus crisis on US power and foreign and transatlantic relations. We have a very good panel today of speakers that I will introduce briefly now. We'll start with Anne-Lorraine Bujon. She is associate researcher at IFRI, which is the French Institute of Research on International Relations, and she's part of the North American program. She will talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on US domestic situation. Then we'll have Dr. Johanna Ralston. She is the CEO of the World Obesity Foundation. She has also had advisory position in the boards of WHO, the World Health Organization, and she's also an associate fellow at GCSP. She will talk about the impact of the crisis on US relation with the World Health Organization. Then we'll have Professor Hall Gardner. He is professor of international and comparative politics and international affairs at the American University of Paris, and he will talk about US relation with its rivals, China, Iran, and Russia. Then we'll have René Schwach, Professor René Schwach. He holds the Jean Monnet Chair of Political Science in the University of Geneva's Department of Political Science and International Relations, and he will talk about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on EU-US relations. Then we'll have Dr. Jamie Shee. He's currently professor of strategy and security at the University of Exeter, but prior to that, he served for 38 years at the international staff at NATO, holding prestigious positions such as spokesman and finally Deputy Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges. He is also an associate fellow at the GCSP, and Jamie will talk about US-NATO relationship. Finally, not least, Dr. Paul Vallée is an associate fellow at the GCSP and an adjunct professor at Sciences Po Paris, and he will talk about US and European narratives on the COVID-19 crisis and the impact on transatlantic relations. Earlier this week, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, published its yearbook that surveyed the different military spending worldwide. The top 15 military spenders in the world in 2019 were the same as those in 2018. Together, the top 15 countries spent 1,553 billion in 2019, accounting for 81% of global military expenditure. With military expenditure of 732 billion, the United States remained by far the largest spender in the world in 2019, accounting for 38% of global military spending, and that represents 3.4% of its GDP. The United States spent almost as much on its military in 2019 as the next 10 highest spender combined. US military expenditures was 5.3% higher in 2019 than in 2018. This is the second year of growth in US military spending following 7 years of continuous decline. However, despite the recent increases, US military expenditure in 2019 remained 50% lower than in its peak in 2010, when the United States military burden was 49% of its GDP. China, on the other hand, the world's second largest military spender, is estimated to have allocated $261 billion to the military in 2019. That represents is 5.1% higher than what China spent in 2018, and 85% higher than what China spent in 2010. So China's military expenditure have increased continuously over the last 55 years consecutively. Global military expenditure is estimated to have been 1,917 billion in 2019, the highest level since 1988. The total was 3.6% higher in real terms in 2018 and 7.2% higher than in 2010. Worldwide military spending rose in each of the 5 years from 2015, having decreased steadily from 2011 until 2014 following the global financial and economic crisis. So this figure shows that America is still in the lead when it comes to military power, but contenders are emerging. This week also, the US has scored more than 1 million infections, and last Tuesday it was reported that more than 58,000 people passed away to coronavirus crisis in the United States. 58,000 is symbolic because 58,220 Americans lost their life during 2 decades in Vietnam, but in 3 months, more Americans now have died from the COVID-19 than during the Vietnam War. The US has by far the most cases in the world than any other country. Recent surveys show that just 28% of Americans say they regularly get information from Trump about the coronavirus crisis. But even as many Americans question Trump's credibility during the pandemic, the overwhelming majority, 82%, still approve how he's doing, which make him at a steady 32% approval rate. During this crisis, President Trump has taken some issue with mainstream US media, WHO, China, and in the past also with its NATO allies. The question of today's webinar is about the future of US power in its foreign relations and the impact the current crisis has on this future of US power.